is 2017. Your friend sends you a link to a YouTube video of a guy counting to 100,000. The video is 24 hours long and somehow amasses tens of millions of views. You decide to follow the channel. It's full of all kinds of innocent stunts and videos, from attempting to spin a fidget spinner for a full day to finding out exactly how many licks it does take to get to the center of a Tootsie Pop. His videos are innocent and amusing, like an honor student doing a crazy dare. It's new and different, and the altruistic bent makes you feel like maybe YouTube could be a force for good. The guy's name? Jimmy Donaldson, aka MrBeast. And it's in that same year, the year of I counted to 100,000, that MrBeast skyrockets to fame. He went from 30,000 subs to 1 million by the end of 2017. And by 2018, Donaldson had given $1 million through his stunts, earning the unofficial title of YouTube's biggest philanthropist. To be fair, the competition wasn't very steep. But in this rise of fame and viewership came more pressure to perform. MrBeast's signature stunts became more elaborate and expensive, less wholesome and homegrown. He introduced new characters. He brought in famous celebrity guests. He embraced high-stakes competitions. He built lavish sets. He recreated Squid Games in real life. He even bought an entire North Carolina neighborhood to demolish it on video. Bloomberg reported that the average production cost of each video rose from $10,000 to $300,000, and by 2023, each was in the millions. Soon enough, YouTube wasn't enough to satisfy his hunger for growth and spectacle. He ventured into the food space with Feastables, a chocolate brand, and Lunchly, a Lunchables competitor. He tried his hand at restaurants with MrBeast Burger, and he recently just announced that he's launching a beverage brand and a mobile game company in 2025. Soon enough, but his desperate search for the next big thing has become unsustainable. Lunchly products were found to have mold. MrBeast Burger was panned for a subpar product, and all of the restaurants closed. This desperate brinksmanship has led to allegations about abuse and exploitation on the set of his Prime Video show, where 1,000 contestants were competing to win $5 million. But the pursuit of spectacle led to lawsuits and hospitalizations. And it's that desperation that has consequences. On YouTube, both his viewership and subscriber growth are declining. In this brazen pursuit of growth and fame, he's forgotten who he was and why people loved him. We're watching in real time what happens when you become hyper-fixated on a single need, in this case, growth, at the expense of everything else. Simply put, you can't sell thirsty. Because no matter how bad we want something, acting desperate often has the opposite impact that we want. People don't want to buy your desperation. MrBeast let his desperation for growth take priority over the integrity of his brand and his product. And now he's in the middle of learning about the consequences. And I don't mean to pick on MrBeast. The truth is, we're all guilty of succumbing to thirsty behaviors as humans, as professionals, as business or brand leaders. And that's what I want to talk to you about today. How do we get past letting our thirst control us? Because desire is natural. Everything we do in some capacity is driven by basic needs. And motivation is the force that pushes us to engage in the behaviors required to satisfy them. And while not exhaustive, there are some core needs that we're highly motivated by. When we're hungry or thirsty, we're motivated to explore and search for food or drink, with increasing intensity the longer that we wait. Then there's sex. If you can remember being a teenager, I don't need to explain to you the intensity with which these motivations can manifest and the absurd behaviors that we'll engage in to satisfy them. And then there's safety and shelter. humans are compelled to avoid bodily and mental harm. You only need to touch a hot pot once, and your entire mental model of the room that you're in evolves to make sure that you don't do it again. And then finally, there's status and inclusion. We're highly motivated to feel like we're part of a group or community, to feel valuable, desirable, like we belong. And as reluctant as we are to admit it at times, we're animals. And alarm bells are triggered when we aren't meeting those needs. We begin to act desperately. We become hyperfixated. We lose sight of our higher cognitive capacity and begin behaving animalistically. And when this animalistic desperation becomes visible to others, it's what the kids call being thirsty. The New York Times described this in 2017 really nicely as a graceless need for approval, affection, or attention, one so raw that it creeps people out. You see this kind of behavior on the internet every day. Not only the internet, but also there. When J.Lo and Ben Affleck broke up earlier this year, she posted her thirst traps for the world to see because she needed the world to confirm that she still got it. And of course, the unsolicited dick pic is difficult to understand in any terms other than thirsty and creepy. And what about some of the most thirsty offenders of all, politicians? During the past US election cycle, it was a constant barrage of desperate texts and emails. And it's not even singularly human. Even this dog feels thirsty. Just look at him. He's a total creeper. So why are we seeing this rise of thirsty behavior everywhere? Thirst is exacerbated when internal or external pressures make it harder for those core needs to be met. As Hippocrates said, desperate times call for desperate measures. Hunger. After a long, exhausting day, many of us are resorting to the taxi for my burrito gambit, where we'll pay huge markups on simple meal just to satisfy our hunger. Sex. The pursuit of love and sex has been complicated by changing cultural norms and anxieties about approaching people in real life. It results in desperate behaviors like going on 200 Tinder dates in a year in the pursuit of love. Safety. The economic climate is making it harder to feel safe and secure. The professional job market has been very volatile, leading some to literally put desperate on their LinkedIn banners. The sentiment is understandable, but the strategy is probably counterproductive. Status. In a world where everything is tied, your worth is tied to where you're seen, we spend outrageous amounts of money on being in the places. This is how you get a $1 billion Eras tour. But it's not just people that have needs that they need to have met. Companies and brands aren't animals, but they're run by them, which means they wind up having similar core motivations. Brands work to satisfy their hunger too. It takes growth-oriented sort of manifestations, hungry for new customers, improved sales, increased stock prices, etc. Companies can't literally reproduce, but they seek partnerships. Mergers and acquisitions, event sponsorships, and brand collaborations are all ways of strengthening a company and ensuring ongoing relevance. Businesses are similarly motivated to stay safe from harm. There's a reason that so many businesses constantly track business metrics, discuss brand safety, and proactively take cost-cutting measures. And brands and businesses also seek status via things like loyalty. When they're in with a group, it means that they'll stay relevant at least a little while longer. And not only that, that loyal group will also drive sales and protect them against critics. But just like humans, brands' alarm bells are triggered when they're not meeting their needs. And just like humans, it's been a chaotic, unpredictable time for business. There are a lot of financial and economic reasons for businesses to be acting desperate, and so I'm going to list a few. The first is this idea of data determinism. Most brands are drowning in data. Data they hold up as the singular source of truth for decision making. But data isn't the capital T truth, it's the detritus that the truth leaves behind, because you can't find data about the future that you want to create. Another reason, the hype cycle. In an effort to stay relevant, hype takes priority over adding value for customers. It's why this Stanford professor says new ideas no longer fuel economic growth the way that they once did. Then there's a rise of vigilantes and polarization that leaves brands shook. No one wants to say or do the wrong thing, so increasingly, no one says or does anything at all. And finally, we can't ignore the pace of content and culture today. Instead of leading a conversation or hosting a party, brands are comfortable just being present, joining in a chorus instead of singing a solo. There we go. The result of all of these pressures is that brands are also acting increasingly thirsty. They're hyper-fixating on satisfying single needs like growth, security, loyalty, partnership, because everything feels harder to accomplish. And consumers can feel that thirst, that graceless need for attention that creeps people out. No one wants to hear from their grocery store multiple times a day. If that was a romantic partner, we would call them clingy or smothering. So let's look at some of the examples of how thirsty can go wrong. When brands are thirsty for growth, they make moves without considering the customers that are already actually using their products or services. When Salesforce was facing intense competitive pressure, they went on an acquisition spree. And while acquisitions can be a very viable strategy, if you don't fix your root product issues, you're just buying new customers to be frustrated with you. Because here's the deal. People recognize it for what it is. Users who are already paying for your products get frustrated when you buy a new company and don't fix the issues that they're paying for. And when brands are thirsty for partnerships, they can fail to consider the impact of what that partnership might mean. Not just mutually beneficial for the businesses, but the impact it has on customers. When Lego partnered with Shell, it got them in a ton of hot water. The partnership was dissolved because of the public outcry from consumers who felt that it directly contradicted Lego's explicit promises like, we strive to play our part in helping build a sustainable future and make a positive impact on society and the planet, which children will inherit. When brands are thirsty for preservation, they're afraid to make bold moves for the future. They wind up in that fast follower strategy. They over-leverage these ideas where beauty brands in 2024 are launching eerily similar products, both in look and formula, but brands aren't fooling anyone, and consumers are beginning to find the charade exhausting. When brands are thirsty for loyalty, they latch on to every cultural trend, however irrelevant to them, in the hope that people will think they're cool and in. But it's not working. It just winds up killing whatever is cool and in and turning consumers off completely. Brands killed Brat Summer. And so what's the result of this thirsty behavior? People are getting the ick, this idea of a feeling of disgust that arises towards a love interest, usually after a specific, often trivial behavior. Because the thing about being thirsty is it becomes all-consuming. We get tunnel vision, hyper-focused on the thing that we're wanting to satisfy, unable to see the bigger picture that we're existing in. And perhaps most scary is that tunnel vision can force your own identity to take a backseat. Everything you do becomes in service of meeting that singular need. Perhaps Snickers captured it best with their classic campaign, "You're not you when you're hungry," or in this case, thirsty. And we don't like it when people or brands aren't themselves. Attachment theory reinforces this idea. Inauthentic behavior is a common characteristic of anxiously attached people, but they're often their own worst enemies, bringing on outcomes they fear the most by acting desperately. As one psychotherapist says, desperation creates separation. Because when you hyper-focus on satisfying one thing, everything else will suffer. As British economist Charles Goodhart is credited with expressing, when a measure becomes a target, it ceases to become a good measure. And here's the truth. Standing out matters. Growth matters. Loyalty, partnership, they all matter. All of your core needs matter. But in contending with the chaos of the past few years, businesses and marketers are falling into bad habits. Feeling thirsty isn't the problem. It can be highly motivating, like we said. Acting thirsty is the problem because it turns everyone off. Nothing is a relationship, everything is a transaction. If you're picking up what I'm putting down, the question is, how do we stop letting our thirst control us? Microsoft is a company that learned how to do this. Not the most exciting example, but I think it works. 10 years ago, Microsoft was in a very different place. They were struggling. Windows 8 was a disaster. The Surface was not selling. Internal politics were holding up projects. Customers were losing faith in this once revered company. Microsoft was then taken over by Satya Nadella, and this all changed. He mastered Microsoft's thirst. So what does this look like? What are some of the principles that we can learn from this? First is being needed, not needy. You need the sale, the love, the growth, the loyalty. Your consumers don't. When you're fixated on your needs, you're asking for something, not offering something. Tit for tat is a flawed strategy in game theory, and it's also a flawed strategy in brand marketing. Microsoft Team, while not without its issues, is a great example of this. The product emerged from a real consumer need, the need to integrate across Microsoft's suite of products. After launching in 2017, Slack wrote a patronizing full-page ad giving them advice. But by focusing on the needs of their users, Microsoft Teams now has 8 times the number of daily active users as Slack. The next thing is to run from the mirage. Magical thinking is just that, magical thinking. Of course, sometimes we get lucky, but relying on the magic of a tropical landscape appearing when you're in the desert probably won't save you. You need to get out of the desert. This is most obvious in Nadella's investment and focus on enterprise software, like Azure, the company's cloud infrastructure business. It's not the most sexy, consumer-facing product, but it's a reliable moneymaker that people needed in the market. By avoiding the mirage, it has grown to become the largest profit driver at the company. Patience and persistence hunting. Humans succeeded in the African steppe by persistence hunting. We didn't sit and wait. We outlasted, outsmarted, and outnumbered our challenges. Brand marketing is a game of patience, building for the future. Microsoft's acquisition of LinkedIn is one example of this. Nadella outsmarted competitors by acquiring one of the largest sales platforms around, and in turn setting up his own enterprise sales teams to better serve their customers. And last is this idea that no brand is an island. No person solves all of their problems alone, nor does any brand or business. You have to have an integrative approach, collaborative partnerships that lead to mutual wins, not just for you and the other business, but for your customers. Microsoft's investment in OpenAI beginning in 2019 is perhaps the best example of this. It's led to significant AI integrations in things like Bing and GitHub Copilot, both of which have now surpassed 100 million daily active users by adding integrated value into the products that they already had. Satya Nadella's time at Microsoft has turned the company around. Yes, financially, $10,000 invested when he joined would have been worth $123,000 at the end of last year, but also as a brand. They are trusted again in ways that they had lost by avoiding acting thirsty. It's all proof that companies can master their thirst. And if you do and avoid hyperfixation, you can find success. Without that mastery, thirst can lead you further from your goals and you lose your customers because ultimately you can't sell thirsty. Thanks. I'm Joey Camire from SYLVAIN. Appreciate your time. Get in touch.